Grace Kelly got to live every little girl's dream, having gone from one of Hollywood's most glamorous screen sirens to a beloved princess when she married Prince Rainier of Monaco. But before she adopted her regal title, Kelly was well known in Hollywood not just for her cool blonde sophistication, but her sizzling off-screen affairs. Growing up in the lap of luxury, Grace was something of an American princess already, with her father being a 3-time Olympic gold medalist and her mother being a women's phys ed coach. Talent and strength were important in the Kelly household, but then sickly little Grace did not fit the family mold, and thus grew up perpetually in the shadow of her prominent parents and promising siblings. Because of this, the introverted Grace retreated into her own imagination where she could always shine. Eventually, this need for attention caused Kelly to act out when she began dating bad boys and expressing an interest in acting, a career that Grace's father considered just a cut above a streetwalker. Of course, anything that pissed off Daddy was a go in Kelly's book. She was able to attend the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and in 4 years' time made her film debut. When the blonde beauty emerged on screen, friends and family that knew her couldn't believe their eyes. Gone was the bulky sweaters, headscarves, and gloves that hid Kelly's slim, willowy figure. With her lithe physique, buttery blonde locks, and arresting baby blues, not to mention a carefully curated faux British accent, the Grace Kelly that emerged on screen stunned everyone, but none more than those who grew up knowing her. At her father's insistence, Grace was made to stay at the Barbizon Hotel for Women in Manhattan, with the hope that staying at the all-women's residence would keep her out of trouble. But trouble seemed to be Grace's middle name, and it also seemed to be exactly what she was looking for. And if she couldn't find it, Grace would make it. She would dance in the halls to Hawaiian music, oftentimes topless, much to the shock of her fellow boarders. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The blonde beauty would begin dating her then theater professor, who confessed to being just as crazy over her as the cameras were. Unfortunately, Grace's parents weren't crazy over him. They knew that their beautiful starlet daughter could do much better and refrained from giving the couple their blessing. This knowledge that nothing would ever be good enough for their little girl seemed to make Grace rebel even harder against her parents' strict view of her. In 1951, when Grace got her first big break in the Western high noon, she would spark up a steamy affair with her leading man, Gary Cooper. This set the stage not only for Grace's tendency to bed her leading men, but also for her apparent preference for fatherly types. Cooper was decades older than her and very married. He was also strapping, masculine, and reminded Grace of her father. According to Cooper, Kelly was a cold dish with a man until you got her pants down. Then she'd explode. It's a testament to Grace's face card that she was chosen by director John Ford to replace Jean Tierney, one of the most beautiful women to ever hit Hollywood. I don't care what anybody says. In the upcoming film, Mogambo. According to Grace, she took the part because 3 things interested her: John Ford, Clark Gable, and a trip to Africa with expenses paid. And boy, Grace couldn't wait to experience all 3. I mean, according to Grace, she said, "What else is there to do if you're alone in a tent in Africa with Clark Gable? I don't know, Grace. Get some work done, rehearse, maybe read some lines?" But apparently Grace didn't know either, because her affair with Gable caused a heat wave so explosive it must have radiated out to her childhood home in Pennsylvania, because word of Grace and Clark's steamy affair got around to Mama Kelly, and when she found out about this, she was horrified. She hopped on the first thing smoking to Africa and joined the crew in hopes of chaperoning her hot-in-the-pants daughter. But this didn't do much to cool Grace's engines, and the pair continued their affair for the duration of the production, much to Grace's dismay. See, the young ingenue was still new in the ways of Hollywood, and while she thought that she and Gable were going to be taking their affair off the production, the seasoned vet had no intention of continuing their liaison off the lot. Once the couple returned to LA, Gable returned to the dating pool. He found the lovesick young ingenue to be too clingy and promptly dumped her, leaving Kelly heartbroken, but not for long. Alfred Hitchcock would pick up the pieces of the young actress's broken heart when he cast her in his film Dial M for Murder. Now, it's not what you think. Grace did not take up with Hitchcock, but his film did put her in the perfect position to find her next conquest. When the creepy director wasn't busy practically abusing his heroine to get the perfect shot, she was busy getting tended to by her leading man, Ray Milland, and their romance was the messiest by far. Once again, Grace found herself with a man who seemed to be married by definition alone, but when Milland's wife found out about the affair, she promptly threw him out of the house. Some reports even claimed that Milland was ready to leave his wife for Grace. That is, until he came to a realization. See, Grace was none too careful about her numerous affairs, and it would come back to bite her when the press began reporting on her messy love life, particularly tabloid queen Hedda Hopper. When Hopper got wind of Kelly's penchant for married men, she laid into Grace, calling her all kinds of homewreckers and even a nymphomaniac. And of course, the rest of the tabloids couldn't wait to follow suit, because you know people can't resist a good reason to crucify a woman in the public eye. The scathing gossip almost ruined Kelly's career, but one has to hand it to the woman. If she'll do anything, it's come out of a scandal like her name. And not only did Grace come out of that affair on top, she came out being just as messy and scandalous as she had been before. Now one of Alfred Hitchcock's infamous Hitchcock blondes, Grace was set to star opposite Jimmy Stewart. And yes, if you're wondering, he was middle-aged and married, which meant he was just Grace's type. But Stewart's wife wasn't playing that. She already knew Grace's reputation for screwing married men and made sure she showed up on that set like clockwork to keep an eye on her husband. After years of playing leading ladies and blonde beauties, Grace wanted a part with some grit. She wanted to prove that she had the chops to be a serious actress, and she would get the opportunity when she read the script for the film The Country Girl. At first, Grace's studio didn't want to loan her out to Paramount for the role, but Grace flexed her muscle. She replied to them by saying, "Well, I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you my address so you can know where to send your Christmas cards." Sis said, "You can either loan me out for a few months or I can quit for good and find a new studio." We have to stand, because I mean, that is iconic. The threat worked, and in a matter of minutes, not only did they agree, but Grace got the part. Now, somewhere in the time frame that she was nailing this difficult new role, she also managed to find time to nail 2 new men. Allegedly, during the filming of Country Girl, Grace was having an affair with actor William Holden, who was apparently so head over heels for Grace that he was also considering leaving his wife for her. I guess, marriage don't mean anything when Grace Kelly enters the picture. On the other hand, Grace was also sleeping with acting heavyweight Bing Crosby, and this affair would lead to even more scandal. In fact, one of the juiciest to circulate Hollywood circles. Reportedly, on the night that Grace won an Oscar for her performance in The Country Girl, Bing Crosby hopped his happy hind parts to her hotel room ready to celebrate. Boy, he just knew Grace was about to come up off some good nookie after her win, and he wanted to be the first person to bask in that afterglow, honey. But he could have just as easily turned right back around, because when he got to the hotel room, he found out that Grace was already popping bottles and poom with his rival Marlon Brando. At this point, Kelly's ability to juggle her too cool for school and too good for you sophisticated screen persona with her actual messy sex kitten antics baffled even the hungriest of man-eaters. Notorious seductress Zsa Zsa Gabor once claimed, "She had more boyfriends in a month than I had in a lifetime. She went to bed with anyone she wanted." But these affairs weren't one-sided. Men chased Grace just as much as she chased them. One fashion designer, Oleg Cassini, fell for Grace after seeing her in Mogambo. He moved hell and earth to be with her, especially when he found a note that she left for him that simply read, "Those who love me, follow me." And Cassini did just that. He ran all the way from California to France, where she was filming her latest film, just to be with her. And according to Cassini, it was worth every minute. He claimed, "I must say, they were the most enchanting days that I've ever had at any time in my life. In fact, they were so enchanting that Cassini proposed to Grace." But once again, no man was good enough for the Kellys' shining star of a daughter. This time, it was Cassini's Russian background and previous marriages that the family disapproved of, or so they said. So, heartbroken, Grace once again gave up on her dreams of marriage. But the heartache surrounding her relationship with Cassini would only get worse when she realized that she was pregnant. And not wanting to bring scandal to herself by being an unwed mother, she aborted the child. Despite this, Kelly still managed to put on a smile for the 1955 Cannes Film Festival, and it was at the film festival that Kelly's life would change for good. While at the Cannes Film Festival, Grace Kelly received an invitation to nearby Monaco, where she would come face to face with its prince and enjoy a tour of the palace while smiling for the cameras. Prince Rainier III was then 32 and single, and he welcomed Grace into the palace gardens and showed her his private zoo. By the time she'd finished her visit, a sizzling connection had sparked between the two of them. Grace Kelly left the splendor of Monaco thoroughly enchanted with its prince. Following their happy interlude, the two of them started a secret correspondence where they grew even closer. And then it was time for the moment of truth. At Christmas, Grace invited Rainier to her parents' place. Grace had wowed Rainier with her down-to-earth personality. Beneath her sparkly exterior, she was actually quite humble, and he found that she was very refined. He, in turn, was intelligent, charismatic, and, of course, a royal. If any man was going to impress her parents, Rainier was the man. After spending less than a full day with one another, the prince asked the eager actress for her hand in marriage. And this time, as you could imagine, her parents didn't object. But the price of marriage came at a high cost: Kelly's hard-earned career. With one last commitment to MGM, she filmed her last picture, High Society, in which she appropriately played a high-class socialite on the verge of marriage. She also made sure to wear her 10.47-carat diamond engagement ring during the filming. Finally, and to much disappointment, the prince announced Kelly's retirement from Hollywood, but her greatest acting feat was yet to come. Now the American princess found herself thrust into a strange and unfamiliar new world as the Princess of Monaco, and understandably, all eyes were on her. Never a fan of the press, now they were a constant fixture in Grace's life. Her wedding was the event of the year, being televised to 30 million people live. Her gown became the dress to be, inspiring future celebrity royal Kate Middleton's own gown half a century later. But while the photos may have looked picturesque, the event of the wedding itself was a crowded, dizzying, chaotic affair in which Prince Rainier and Princess Grace were swarmed by paparazzi and fans. The memory became so unpleasant for them that neither party even enjoyed looking at their wedding photos. After enjoying a relatively fairy tale honeymoon, Grace would be slapped with a painful dose of reality. To keep up appearances, Prince Rainier banned Grace's films from being screened in Monaco. Not only did this hurt Grace, but being cut off from her passion of performing sent her spiraling into a depression. And it would only get worse when Grace discovered that her once passionate and loving husband could be a cold and cruel man. Looking for an outlet for her creative pursuits, Grace began hosting an annual poetry reading, an event that her husband did not attend for years. And then there were her nasty in-laws. Rainier's family could be just as apathetic as the prince himself. Unfortunately, they were the only family Grace had to rely on. Becoming a princess meant that she had to cut off her career and her ties to her normal life. Isolated, lonely, and disillusioned, Grace would only sink further into her unhappiness. Less than a year after marrying, she and Rainier welcomed their first daughter, Caroline. Then a year later, she made the prince's dreams come true by giving birth to a son named Albert. But the birth of their children couldn't bridge the chasm in their relationship, and soon Grace began to realize how little she and her husband actually had in common. While Rainier was often sour-faced and wrapped up in business affairs, social butterfly Grace became the face of the royal family, and the people of Monaco adored her for it. Her star power transformed the nation into a magnet for tourism, property values soared sky-high, and the dwindling power of Monaco began to climb once again. But although Grace certainly revived Monaco, it did not return the favor. By 1960, Grace had hit an all-time low. Her father had died, and adding to the loss, Grace suffered several miscarriages. Grace needed desperately to escape and wanted more than anything to go back to acting, but the cold and controlling Prince Rainier wouldn't hear of it. Soon, however, Grace would end up getting her wish when the palace announced that Grace would be set to star in the Alfred Hitchcock film, Marnie. Unfortunately, this wouldn't come to fruition either. Grace turned down the part, citing scheduling conflicts and family obligations as her reasons why, but Hitchcock himself believed that Monaco's conservative culture was what discouraged her from actually taking the part. This wouldn't be the only time that Grace's royal obligations interfered with her happiness. Press continued to go after her, her past, her children, and worse yet, her already strained marriage. They reported on the prince's many alleged mistresses, hurting the already fragile Kelly more in the process. To make matters worse, they further spread rumors that she had never broken off her affair with her past leading man, Cary Grant, even after entering the royal family. When decades later in 1981, she would meet a then 19-year-old Diana Spencer, still freshly engaged to Prince Charles III, she attempted to warn the young princess-to-be. She pulled her aside in the ladies' room and confessed to the deep loneliness she felt. Then, she chillingly told the future princess, "Don't worry, dear, it'll only get worse." If only either princess had heeded that warning. Just a year later, on September 13, 1982, Grace, along with her daughter Stephanie, were driving home along the hilly Monaco streets when Grace reportedly had a stroke. She lost control of the car, which plunged over 50 feet down the mountainside, landing on its roof. Paramedics rushed mother and daughter to the hospital, and Stephanie survived, but sadly, Grace had died on impact. This tragic accident would bring an end to the reign of the Hollywood princess's long life.